September 2nd, off the coast of Venezuela. 11 men on a boat. First strike hits, most of them are gone. The sea turns into debris, smoke, bodies, wreckage drifting. You think that's the end? No. Reuters describes what the video shown to Congress reveals. There are still 2 people alive, clinging to what is left, floating, waiting. Then about an hour later, boom, strike number 2. Final count, 11 men. Nobody makes it out. And here is why this story does not go away. Not because the US hit a boat, because of one question that hits harder than the explosion. If the threat is already in the water, drifting, helpless, why fire again? Stay with me. Do not scroll. Because what happened on that sea was not just an operation. It was the first page of a rulebook nobody voted on. US warships, aircraft, all aimed at Venezuela. Trump calls it Operation Southern Spear, and the pitch is simple. Blow up the drugs out there before they ever reach here. September 1st. Intelligence flags a fast, unmarked boat cutting through the Caribbean. U.S. officials say the crew is tied to Tren de Aragua, a Venezuelan gang Washington just labeled a foreign terrorist organization. The official story is clean, powerful. Stop narco-terrorists, stop the money, stop the drugs before they hit American streets. So in the early hours, a U.S. aircraft fires. The boat breaks apart. Reuters later reports the first strike takes out most of the men on board. But here is the detail that changes the whole story. Inside Pentagon briefings, officials acknowledge some people survived the first blast. They are in the water, wounded, disoriented, no longer racing toward anything. And yet a follow-on strike is ordered. Not a warning, not a disable, not leave them and move on. A second strike meant to finish the target completely. When the smoke clears, all 11 people connected to that boat are gone. Now Trump posts to Truth Social like it is a victory lap. Narco-terrorists eliminated. Venezuelan gang, loaded with cocaine. Stop them cold. At the White House podium, his press secretary backs the same message. Self-defense, international waters, terrorists funding violence. That is the story they want you to live inside. But the cracks show up fast. Because once you admit there were survivors, you do not just have a strike, you have a timeline. And that timeline forces one brutal question. What exactly was the second strike for? If you want the part they do not like talking about, stay with me, because Chapter 2 is where the why shows up. And it is not in a press conference, it is in a memo. And if you do not want to live on the official story alone, subscribe. This is exactly the kind of operation I track from the first strike to the last document. This is where it stops being another drug mission and turns into something bigger. Because behind the scenes, Trump's team pulled out a classified memo from the Justice Department's Office of Legal Counsel, the OLC, the same office that has blessed every sketchy legal move for the last 20 years. And according to reporting from The Guardian and other outlets, the memo pushes a new idea. If a boat is unflagged, carrying cocaine, and the money is believed to fuel cartel violence, then the boat can be treated like a military target. Not a smuggling case, not a criminal arrest problem, but part of an armed conflict with narco-terror groups. Think about what that changes. Under that theory, the U.S. does not have to catch the crew, does not have to board the vessel, does not have to prove anything in court first. It can destroy the boat from the air, knowing people on board will likely die, and still call it lawful. Then on October 1st, Trump formally notifies Congress. The United States is now in a non-international armed conflict with these cartels in the Caribbean. From that moment on, the argument becomes these are not criminals, these are enemy fighters. But here is the problem. A lot of legal experts do not buy it. A law professor at George Washington University tells Reuters, if this does not qualify as a real armed conflict, then force like this is supposed to be a last resort, not the first move against a boat that cannot shoot back. And even in real war, there is a basic principle. If someone is out of the fight, shipwrecked, wounded, surrendering, you cannot treat them like they are still attacking you. So when the Pentagon admits it knew there were survivors and a second strike still happened, former military lawyers call it flat out wrong and warn service members could face serious legal exposure later. This is not just one boat anymore. This is about how far a president can go when he decides a memo is all he needs to turn suspects into targets. And if you think this stays out there on the ocean, wait, because Chapter 3 puts a name and a face on this, and it is not who you think. If this stayed abstract, memos, lawyers, theories, the story might have died quietly in Washington, but then another strike, another boat, and a name. On September 15th, off the Caribbean coast near Colombia, U.S. forces hit another small vessel. Washington frames it as another narco-terror boat. Among the dead, Alejandro Carranza Medina, a 42-year-old Colombian fisherman. His family says he had no ties to trafficking. He was working, trying to feed people, and they say they have been threatened just for speaking out. With human rights lawyers, the family files a formal complaint with the Inter-American Commission on Human Rights in Washington. Their claim is simple. This was not justice. This was force without due process. Colombian President Gustavo Petro goes further. He calls the strikes outright murders and says his citizen had nothing to do with the drug trade. Now you can feel the split. In U.S. polling, big majorities support blowing up drug boats before drugs ever reach American shores. But when people get asked the sharper question, do you support taking out suspected traffickers abroad with no trial, support drops fast. Because it is one thing to cheer a tough president, it is another thing to accept this possibility. Some of those bodies, they might have been fishermen, not traffickers. If you think stories like this should not disappear into a headline and a briefing, hit subscribe and stay with me because I am tracking the human cost, not just the politics. Now zoom out. Because this is not one boat, this is a blueprint. By early December, U.S. forces have carried out around 20 strikes on alleged drug vessels in the Caribbean and the Pacific, and more than 70 people have died across at least 2 oceans. Warships sit off Venezuela. Trump talks publicly about treating airspace around the country as closed. And Reuters reports U.S. planners are weighing options that could include regime change operations. At a G7 meeting in Canada, France's foreign minister warns these strikes risk violating international law and destabilizing a region where France has citizens and territories. Canada, caught in the middle, tries to quietly distance itself, signaling intelligence should not be used to pick targets, while still continuing joint patrols with the U.S. Coast Guard. And inside Washington, the politics are brutally simple. Trump's base loves it. Hit them before they hit us. But here is what gets lost in the cheering. This is how you normalize killing people based on suspicion alone. You change a memo, you change a definition, and you slide the drug war into something that looks like war, without calling it one. And here is the part people should be afraid to ignore. If this legal theory survives, it does not stop with cocaine boats. Once the U.S. labels a group narco-terror, then anything that funds them, a warehouse, a truck, a jungle camp, can be argued into the same category. So the question is not, does it work? The question is, where does it end? Today, it's boats in the Caribbean. Tomorrow, warehouses in Venezuela. Then what? Neighborhoods where cartels operate. And now we are at the verdict. And I am not choosing for you. But I'm going to show you what your choice actually means. So here is where we are. A U.S. commander authorizes 2 strikes on a boat after the government acknowledges there were survivors in the water. A secret memo says, as the boat is the target, and the deaths are treated as the cost of self-defense. Families in Colombia and Venezuela say fishermen, not traffickers, were caught under U.S. fire. And the Trump administration insists this is all part of an armed conflict with narco-terror groups threatening the United States. If you believe the intelligence, maybe this is the price of protecting American lives before fentanyl and cocaine hit U.S. streets. If you do not, then this looks like something else. A powerful country deciding suspicion is enough to end lives without a courtroom. I am not here to tell you what to think. I am here to show you how far this doctrine goes and what it means when the war on drugs starts borrowing the language of war. So I will leave you with this. If a memo and a drone feed can turn suspects into combatants, what is the next line that disappears? Drop your take in the comments. Is Trump's war on narco-terror making America safer, or is this the moment the rules changed and nobody voted? And if you want more deep dives into how Trump's decisions are reshaping America and the world, subscribe to True Talk so you do not miss what comes next.